Our scripture passage this morning was from John's Gospel, part of the 15th chapter. And if you listened carefully to that earlier in our worship service this morning, you found that it has some pretty powerful thoughts in it. Since this is Memorial Day weekend, it seems fitting that we understand that these words that Jesus spoke, they were a huge part of how he wanted to be remembered by his friends. These were among his very last words, his very last thoughts spoken to them just before the downward spiral began that would lead to his arrest, his crucifixion, his death, and his burial. One of the key things that Jesus told them was that they were his friends. And by implication, that means that you and I, that we too are his friends. And I'm wondering this morning exactly what does that mean to you? What are some of the characteristics that you associate with being a friend? Having a friend. Is a friend somebody who understands you? Somebody who sympathizes with you? Is it somebody who stands by you and has your back no matter what? Is a friend somebody who at times will tell you things you don't want to hear, but maybe you really need to hear them? I suspect friendship has all of those attributes. Those are all kinds of the things that you and I would associate with having a friend or being a friend. I like some of the thoughts that the late writer Stephen Ambrose put together. He wrote this book, among many, which he entitled Comrades. And in that book, he talked about friendship. And he pointed out the fact that friendships are really different from all other relationships. Unlike acquaintances, friendship's based on love. And yet, unlike lovers, married couples, friendship is totally free of jealousy. Unlike children and parents, friendship doesn't know criticism or resentment. Friendship, he said, doesn't have any status in law. Where you've got business partnerships, they're based on a contract. So is marriage, really. Parents also are bound by laws of the state in which they live. But friendship is always entered into freely, exercised freely. So having a friend and being a friend, that's something pretty special, isn't it? I'm reminded of the 10-year-old boy, and he had this small mongrel dog, and he entered it at the local hybrid dog show. Now, as you might expect, there were many beautiful dogs in that show. None of them were mutts. And many of those animals had equally beautiful owners. So now they're getting ready for the actual show, and for almost an hour the boy had been gently grooming and hugging his pet, and when his name was finally called, he took that little dog's head and he cupped it in his hands. And he looked that puppy in the eye with all the love that a small boy could possibly show. And he said to him, "Now look, you mustn't be upset if you don't win a prize, because they don't know you as well as I do." I love that story. But it points out to us that sometimes a friend is somebody who knows us better than anyone knows us, and maybe still is willing to call us a friend anyway. So we're kind of back to that original question of what does the word friend mean to you? Does it mean somebody who would lay down their life for you? This is Memorial Day weekend, and there have been some really significant studies done within the American military. And these studies have tried to answer the question of what is the motivation of fighting men and women who are put out there in harm's way and they face the likelihood of being killed. What's the motivation there? And there's a common answer that seems to rise to the surface every time. And it's the same answer that you find from the Revolutionary War, through the Civil War, through the great world wars, to Korea and Vietnam, right up to the present time in Afghanistan and Iraq. The studies indicate rather clearly that the motivation to risk one's life on a battlefield, it's not so much about patriotic duty. It's not so much about flag waving for cause and country. It's not so much about training. It's not so much about getting a direct order from a superior officer to get out there and face enemy fire. No. No, the willingness to fight for and the willingness to die for if necessary seems to be much more firmly rooted in the sense of your friends. The people that you cannot and will not ever let down or abandon in combat. It's that band of brothers and sisters who are your friends. They are the ones that these studies indicate who, regardless of personal risk, regardless of the degree of danger to themselves, they are the ones who will be there for you and you for them. And they know that. And you know that. That's just about the deepest sense of human faithfulness I think that people are capable of feeling, that they're capable of doing. Jesus said, and it was part of our scripture reading this morning, he said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another just like I've loved you." And no one has a greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. If you define a friend as being somebody like that, then maybe you will reflect on this Memorial Day weekend about the men and the women who have laid down their lives on our behalf. In Washington, D.C., there are a lot of memorials to the sacrifices of our military personnel over the years. So many memorials, in fact, that our nation's capital has often been called a city of monuments. Now, there's a book that's been written about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's that place that's often just called The Wall. I hope you've seen it. I hope maybe you've been there. And the book is entitled Offerings at the Wall. And it records some of the thousands and thousands of objects and letters that have been placed there over the years. Objects and letters left there as if it were a shrine. Left there by relatives and comrades of the men and the women whose sacrifices are memorialized there. And one example in that book tells about a Navy officer. And this was back in the fall of 1982, and it was just as the wall was first being built. And he walked up to the trench where they were beginning to pour the concrete footings. And he stood there looking down at that hole in the earth for just a couple moments, and then he tossed something into the mud below and saluted. Now, there was a workman who saw him do this and walked over and asked him what he was doing and why. And the naval officer said that he was giving his dead brother's Purple Heart to the wall. It was his offering. In Latin America, in some countries, it's said that the people there have a wonderful way of saying thank you to those who have given their lives for the sake of freedom. And what they do is they come together in public gatherings, and they call out the names of those sisters and brothers who have been killed, and then they tell their stories of how and why and when they died. And when each name is called out, the entire community that's gathered there, they respond to that roll call name by shouting out, "Presente, presente." Present, here. He is here, she is here, we are here. And in a sense, during those brief moments, those who have been killed, they are present. They are alive. They're like a cloud of witnesses forming there, right in the midst of all those who have come to thank them. And there's this commitment to keep the spirit and the life of those who have given their all, to keep that alive and real in their culture and in their community. Now, Memorial Day for us, we know it's supposed to be a time when you and I remember, when every American stops to say thank you. It's supposed to be a day when you and I recall the debt that we owe to so many. And it should be a day when we recommit our lives to the values for which they died. But the reality is, we all know there are going to be many, many people in our land who are going to walk all the way through the rest of this weekend. They're never going to give a single thought to those who died on their behalf. It's funny. In that respect, it isn't a whole lot different from what sometimes happens in our faith, is it? Yeah, that can happen in our churches too. Only there, it can happen every week, not just on a holiday weekend. What I mean is that people enjoy the benefits of God's love. They enjoy the gift of their salvation, but they never give much thought at all to what Christ has done for them. Well, maybe on Good Friday for an hour or so, but then that's pretty much it. The crucifixion seems so long ago and so far away. It was in another time, another age. It was another culture. Hard to relate, hard to connect and appreciate, and that makes it hard to be thankful. The name of Clarence Jordan probably doesn't ring an immediate bell with any of us, but Clarence Jordan was a black pastor, very talented man, very visionary guy. And he was also a very courageous person who early on served the cause of civil rights in the South. Now, he wrote a really popular book that he called the Cotton Patch Version of the Gospels. Maybe there's some of you out there who recall reading it. More importantly, Clarence Jordan also founded a movement that morphed and was known in different ways in different times, but now we call it Habitat for Humanity. Quite a guy. Well, Clarence Jordan was once invited to preach at a church dedication, and this church, it had been built by a friend of his. It was another black pastor in the South. So when Jordan arrived, he found that his friend was really proud of himself. Actually, pretty full of himself, because of this wonderful accomplishment for having built this church building. Well, the place was huge. The seating was very, very comfortable. There were these beautiful windows throughout. The educational space was great. And as they finished touring the inside, they finally walked outside. And as they walked around the perimeter of the building, at one point the friend pointed up to this huge illuminated cross. And it sat high up on the steeple, right at the very top of this magnificent building. And he said to Jordan, he said, you know, that cross, that steeple, the lighting and everything, that alone cost us $15,000. Now at the time, that was an enormous sum. Clarence Jordan looked back at his friend and he said, I think maybe y'all were cheated. His friend clearly was not expecting to hear that, and he said, What? What? And Jordan said, I think maybe y'all were cheated. Because it used to be, you know, Christian could get the cross for free. It was a way of reminding his friend how shallow our means of saying thank you often are for what's been done on our behalf. The cross was free for you and for me because somebody else bought it and paid for it for us. A friend who did it for us out of love. A friend who literally was a friend to the very end. Those are some of the thoughts that I just wanted to share with you on this day before Memorial Day, this really special weekend. Keep them in mind as you and I walk through this next little while together. In the meantime, be safe, stay healthy, and remember how much God has richly blessed each one of us. And we do have so much to be thankful for, and so many to be thankful to. God bless you. Thank you for being with us again this morning. And we'll see you next week. Goodbye for now.